When my sister screamed, "You've destroyed this family," it didn't even surprise me anymore. What caught me off guard was how calm I felt. My mom's voice followed right after, sharp and cold. "You were always the problem anyway." I remember standing there, frozen, the weight of her words sinking in deeper than I wanted to admit. That night, I packed my things in silence. No yelling, no goodbye, just the quiet sound of zippers and drawers closing while the people who were supposed to love me most tore me apart from the hallway. My name's Evan. I'm 26 now, but this story really started when I was 25, the night I left home for good. I didn't know it then, but walking out that door was just the beginning of something much bigger. Because exactly 1 year later, I woke up to 23 missed calls and a message that made my hands shake so bad I almost dropped my phone. But before that moment, before the calls, before everything collapsed, there were signs. Small cracks that turned into canyons over the years. I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside. Two-story house, dad who worked as an accountant, mom who stayed home, and my sister, Chloe, 2 years younger, always the golden child. If you ever saw our family photos, you'd think we were straight out of a magazine. Mom's hand on Chloe's shoulder, dad smiling proudly, me standing off to the side, half in the frame, half forgotten. Chloe could do no wrong. She was the kind of kid who'd borrow money from mom's purse, blame me, and somehow end up being comforted while I got grounded. I used to think that's just how families worked, that some kids were naturally easier to love. It wasn't until high school that I realized the scale of it. When Chloe crashed dad's car at 17, my parents brushed it off as a mistake. When I dented the garage door backing out too fast a year later, my dad didn't talk to me for a week. I tried not to let it get to me. I studied hard, got a scholarship, moved out at 18, and barely looked back. But family has a way of pulling you back in, no matter how much distance you try to keep. For me, it started when my dad got sick. He was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's, and everything changed overnight. I moved back home to help, partly because I wanted to, and partly because guilt is a powerful motivator when you're raised to believe everything is your fault. When I came back, Chloe had already been living there for years, helping out, as mom called it. Except, from what I could see, helping meant sleeping in until noon, ordering takeout with dad's money, and scrolling through her phone while I handled the actual work, doctor visits, prescriptions, late-night calls when dad couldn't stop shaking. I didn't complain. I told myself that maybe this was my way of making things right with mom, that maybe if I just showed her I cared, things would finally be different. They weren't. The first real fight started over something stupid, dad's old watch. It wasn't even an expensive one, but it meant a lot to him. I found it sitting on Chloe's desk one night, and when I asked her why she had it, she rolled her eyes. "Relax, Evan." He said I could have it. When I asked dad the next morning, he looked confused. He hadn't said that. When I told mom, she sighed like I was starting trouble. "Evan, your sister's been under a lot of stress. Just let her have it." That's how it always went. I'd bring up something unfair, mom would defend her, Chloe would smirk behind her coffee mug, and I'd feel like I was losing my mind. But what really got to me wasn't the favoritism. It was the way mom started to talk to me. Short, dismissive, like every word I said was an inconvenience. "Maybe if you helped more around here," she'd snap when I got home from work, even though I was the one paying the bills she couldn't keep up with. Chloe, meanwhile, didn't have a job. She'd tried a few, a boutique, a real estate office, a social media gig, but none of them lasted more than a month. Somehow, mom always had an excuse for her. "You're lucky to have her," mom would say. "At least she stays close." Close. That word stuck with me, because being close in our family didn't mean love, it meant control. The breaking point came slowly, over months. It was death by 1,000 cuts. I started noticing money disappearing from dad's account, small amounts at first, then hundreds. When I confronted mom, she said Chloe was borrowing it for groceries. But the fridge was always empty. I checked her Instagram once. She was posting pictures at rooftop bars and weekend getaways. Meanwhile, dad's medication bills were piling up. When I brought it up again, mom's tone turned sharp. "You're not his keeper, Evan. Don't start acting like one." But I was the only one acting like one. I was the one staying up late, making sure he took his pills, fixing whatever Chloe forgot. The resentment grew quietly inside me, like a slow poison. Dad passed away 6 months later. Peacefully, they said. But nothing about what came after was peaceful. At the funeral, Chloe played the grieving daughter so well it almost made me sick. She cried into Mom's shoulder, gave a speech about how Dad always believed in her, and even threw in a line about how she'd make him proud. I stood off to the side, holding back everything I wanted to say. People came up to me afterward, offering their condolences, calling me strong. But I wasn't strong. I was tired. A week later, we sat down to go through Dad's things. He hadn't left a will. He'd mentioned wanting to, but it never happened. I figured we'd split things evenly. I didn't even care about the money. I just wanted some of his keepsakes, the watch, a few old photos, maybe the guitar we used to fix together. But when I brought it up, Chloe laughed. You? You barely even lived here anymore. Mom didn't say anything. She just looked at me like she agreed. I felt something inside me shift that day. It wasn't anger, not yet, more like clarity. A kind of cold, steady realization that I didn't belong there anymore. Still, I stayed a few more months. I told myself it was to help Mom adjust, but the truth is, I wasn't ready to let go. Every time I thought about leaving, guilt pulled me back. Maybe if I just worked harder, maybe if I said the right thing, maybe if I gave them time. Then came the night everything broke. It started with Chloe accusing me of stealing from Dad's old savings, the same account she'd been draining for months. Mom sided with her instantly. Why would she lie, Evan? She demanded, voice trembling with anger that didn't even sound real. You've always been jealous of her. You can't stand to see her happy. That's when Chloe said it. You've destroyed this family. And Mom added, you were always the problem anyway. I remember staring at both of them, realizing there was nothing left to say. The words didn't even hurt the way they used to. I just nodded, walked to my room, and started packing. I left that night with 2 bags and a heart that felt like it had been hollowed out. I didn't look back. For a year, I stayed silent. Moved to another city, found a small apartment, started over. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was quiet, painfully quiet, but it was mine. Then, exactly 1 year later, I woke up to 23 missed calls from Chloe and Mom, and a message that made my hands shake so hard I had to sit down before opening it. I had no idea that what came next would pull me right back into the family I thought I'd escaped. When I woke up that morning, the light filtering through my blinds felt wrong. Too bright, too intrusive. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand, lighting up for what felt like the 100th time. I blinked at the screen. 23 missed calls. 10 from Mom, 9 from Chloe, and the rest from an unknown number that I didn't recognize. At first, I thought maybe something had happened to one of them. An accident, an emergency, something big. But when I saw the message preview from Chloe, my stomach twisted. Evan, you need to come home. Now. Please. No exclamation marks. No insults. Just please. I didn't even know she could say that word to me anymore. My first instinct was to ignore it. I'd promised myself I wouldn't go back, that I'd close that chapter for good. But something in my gut told me this wasn't just another manipulation. So I called her back. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was shaky, not her usual confident, sharp tone. Evan, oh thank God. You need to come home. It's Mom, her voice broke for a second. She did something stupid. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. I grabbed my jacket, barely remembering to lock my door before running out. The drive back to that house, the one I swore I'd never see again, felt longer than it ever had. I hadn't been there in a year, but every road sign, every turn felt etched into me like a scar that hadn't faded. When I pulled up to the driveway, Chloe was standing outside. Her eyes were red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. For a moment, she looked like the little sister I used to protect when she got scared of thunderstorms. But that illusion shattered the moment she saw me. She hesitated, just long enough for me to know that whatever was happening wasn't as simple as she made it sound. Inside, the house looked wrong. Not messy, exactly, but empty in a way that felt deliberate. Half the furniture was gone, and the photos that used to line the hallway were missing. The air smelled faintly of dust and something bitter, like old perfume mixed with regret. I found Mom sitting in the living room, staring at the blank space where Dad's armchair used to be. Her hair had gone grayer, her skin thinner, but her eyes, those cold, unyielding eyes, still had that same sharpness. Evan, she said, like it was both a greeting and an accusation. Chloe said you needed help. I managed. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Help? That's funny coming from you. Chloe stepped in quickly, kneeling beside her. Mom, please don't start. He just got here. I felt like I was intruding on a scene that had been playing out long before I arrived. Whatever had happened, it wasn't sudden. It was the final crack after years of tension. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she picked up a folder from the coffee table and shoved it toward me. Since you're so curious, you might as well see what your father left us with. I opened it. Bank statements, debt notices, and a letter from the mortgage company. My chest tightened as I read through them. Thousands of dollars in debt, overdue bills, and a notice of foreclosure. I looked up at her. How long have you known? Since after he died, she said flatly. But Chloe promised she'd help. I turned to Chloe. Help? With what? Posting vacation photos and pretending everything's fine. Her eyes filled with tears. Evan, I didn't know it was this bad. She told me. Mom slammed her hand on the table, startling both of us. Enough. You both think you're so much better than me, but neither of you understands what it's like to lose everything. That's when I realized it wasn't just about money. This was about control, the thing she'd been losing since Dad passed away. And now she needed someone to blame. The conversation spiraled fast. Mom accused me of abandoning her, of leaving her with all the mess. I reminded her that I'd been the one cleaning up after Chloe's disasters for years. Chloe tried to mediate, but every word out of her mouth made it worse. At one point, Mom snapped, "You think you're some kind of hero because you ran away? You left me alone with a daughter who can't even hold down a job." Chloe's face went pale. Mom, but she didn't stop. You're both disappointments. One ran away, and the other can't do anything right. That's when I saw it. The first crack in Chloe's expression. She wasn't angry. She was humiliated. It hit me that this was probably the first time Mom had turned that cruelty toward her instead of me. I could have stepped in. I could have stopped it. But I didn't. I just watched. After that day, I didn't plan on coming back. But a week later, Chloe showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair tied up messily. She didn't even say hello, just walked in and sat down on my couch. I can't do it anymore, she said quietly. Mom's losing it. She keeps blaming me for the money problems. I told her I'd talk to you because you're good with numbers and stuff. It was strange hearing her admit weakness, even in such a small way. I offered her water, and she started telling me everything. How Mom had taken out loans in her name, how she'd sold Dad's tools and collectibles, even how she tried to cash out one of his old insurance policies that wasn't even hers to touch. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because she told me not to. She said you'd just judge me. I sighed. Chloe, I'm not trying to judge you. But you have to see that she's using you. She always has. She didn't reply, just stared down at her hands. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. We decided to meet with the bank together the next day to see what could be done. I thought, maybe, this was the turning point, the part where she and I finally started to rebuild something. But the next morning, when I went to pick her up, she didn't answer her phone. Or the door. I knocked for nearly 10 minutes before realizing something was off. I peeked through the window and saw boxes stacked by the entryway. It took me a few hours to piece it together. Mom had convinced her to move back in temporarily while she sorted things out. Chloe had chosen her again. It shouldn't have hurt. I should have expected it, but it did. 2 months passed without contact. I focused on work, tried to move forward. Until one afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a lawyer. Mr. Gray, he asked. This is regarding your late father's estate. There have been some recent developments. My pulse quickened. Developments? What kind? He hesitated. Your mother and sister have filed to claim full ownership of the property. They've submitted documents stating that you forfeited your right when you left the residence. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process the words. They what? I'm afraid so. They presented signed statements. Your mother says you verbally renounced any interest. Your sister co-signed. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the wall. Chloe had signed? After everything she'd told me? That was the moment everything inside me broke. I drove straight to the house that evening, not even thinking about what I'd say. When I arrived, Chloe was in the driveway, loading bags into her car. Mom's voice echoed from inside. Evan, you shouldn't be here, Chloe said softly. Don't, I snapped. Don't tell me you didn't know. She avoided my eyes. It's just easier this way. Mom said it was the only option. Easier? You forged my name. Her lip trembled. I didn't forge it. She said you gave permission. Do you even hear yourself? I said, You let her drag you down again, and now you're helping her steal from me. From Dad. That's when Mom appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. You don't deserve a cent of this family's money. You left. You made your choice. I turned to her. No, Mom. You made yours. Over and over again. The air felt thick with everything that had never been said. All the years of quiet resentment, the unspoken favoritism, the manipulations dressed up as love. I wanted to scream, to tell them how much they'd hurt me. But instead, I did something worse. I went silent. Because silence, in that moment, said more than anything I could have screamed. I walked past them into the house, found the drawer where Dad used to keep his old letters, and took one. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting faded. It was the last note he'd written to me before he got too sick to hold a pen properly. Don't let them take everything from you, Evan. Not the things that matter. I folded it carefully, slipped it into my pocket, and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard Chloe whisper, "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not yet. But something inside me had changed. The part of me that always tried to make peace, to fix things, to be the bigger person, it was gone. And what replaced it was colder, sharper, patient. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to forgive or forget. I was going to make things right my way. And it would start with that letter. When I left the house that night, I didn't go home right away. I drove without a destination, through streets I barely recognized, past restaurants that had changed names, and people who looked too busy to care. My hands were shaking the entire time, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I don't even remember where I ended up parking. Somewhere near the old park Dad used to take me to when I was a kid. The swings were rusted now, the benches covered in graffiti, but sitting there in the dark, it was the first time in months I actually let myself cry. I wasn't just angry, I was exhausted. Years of trying to be the good son, the one who held everything together, had drained whatever was left of me. I kept replaying Chloe's voice in my head. It's just easier this way. That sentence alone crushed something inside me. I realized then that I'd been chasing a version of family that didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never did. For the next few weeks, I spiraled quietly. I still went to work, still smiled when people asked how I was, but I was barely there. My boss, Mark, noticed. One afternoon, he called me into his office. "You've been off lately," he said gently. "You're one of the sharpest guys here, but something's eating you alive. You want to talk about it?" I almost brushed it off, but something about his tone made me pause. So I told him, not everything, but enough for him to understand. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. "Family can be the hardest kind of poison," he said. "But I'll tell you something, Evan, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better." That line stuck with me. It sounded cliché at first, but over time, it became something like a mantra. I didn't know what better meant yet, but I knew it wasn't what I had. So I started small. I moved to a new apartment, not fancy, but quiet. No shared walls, no memories lingering in the furniture. I bought secondhand things and built the rest myself. There was something strangely healing about putting together a table, screwing in bolts, tightening them with my own hands. It made me feel grounded again. Work became my escape. I started staying late, not because I had to, but because it was the one place I felt in control. Numbers made sense. Deadlines made sense. People didn't. I began taking on side projects, helping small businesses with their accounting problems, even doing freelance budgeting online. It started as a distraction, but before I realized it, it had turned into something more. Within 6 months, I had a growing list of clients who kept referring me to others. My phone buzzed constantly, and my evenings were full, not with arguments or guilt, but with purpose. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken away from me. But the emotional scars didn't fade overnight. There were nights when I'd wake up from dreams of that house. The arguments, the disappointment, Mom's cutting words. Sometimes I'd catch myself checking Chloe's social media, half expecting to see some apology or sign of regret. What I found instead were pictures of her smiling at brunches, posing with friends, posting motivational quotes about family unity and moving on. I almost laughed the first time I saw one of her captions. Sometimes you have to let go of toxic people, even if they're family. The irony was painful. Still, I didn't respond. I'd learned silence was my most powerful weapon. One night, around 9 months after I'd left for good, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to. Evan, it's me. Chloe. Her voice was soft, hesitant. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then, what do you want? I know I messed up, she said. Mom, she's not well. I just thought you should know. I stayed quiet. She's been confused lately. She forgets things, accuses me of stealing when I haven't. I think it's getting worse. There was a pause, then she added, almost pleading, can you come by? Just to see for yourself? I wanted to say no. Every part of me screamed not to get dragged back into that black hole. But curiosity, or maybe guilt, made me agree. When I showed up 2 days later, the house looked worse than ever. Paint peeling off the walls, stacks of unopened mail by the door. Mom was in the kitchen, muttering to herself while stirring a pot of soup that looked half-burnt. When she saw me, her eyes widened with something that flickered between recognition and resentment. You, she said slowly. You finally showed up. Mom, I started. I just wanted to, she cut me off. Don't act like you care now. You left me. You both did. Chloe tried to intervene. Mom, please. He's here to help. Help? Mom laughed bitterly. He's only here because he wants what's left. I realized then that nothing had changed. Maybe it never would. I left that night without saying goodbye. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the image of her, frail, lost, angry at everyone and everything. And as much as I wanted to hate her, part of me just felt sad. Because I knew that underneath all the bitterness, there used to be love. It just got buried under years of pain and pride. After that visit, something shifted in me. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped replaying the past like an endless film reel. Instead, I started focusing on building the future I wanted, one where I didn't need their validation. Over the next year, my side business exploded. I left my day job to run it full-time. What started as helping small local clients turned into a legitimate consulting firm with 2 part-time employees and contracts in multiple states. I worked 12-hour days, drank too much coffee, and barely took weekends off, but it didn't matter. For once, my success was mine alone. People started to notice. Mark, my old boss, reached out to congratulate me. Even some of the clients who'd dismissed me before started asking for partnerships. I could feel the balance of my life tilting from survival to growth. Still, every victory came with a quiet ache. There were moments I caught myself wishing Dad could see it, wishing he could see that I'd made something of myself despite all of it. That thought alone kept me going on the hard days. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a court notice. My mother had defaulted on multiple loans, including one that had my name listed as a co-signer. Except, I had never signed anything. At the bottom of the page was a shaky, forged version of my signature. I sat there, staring at it for a long time. Not in disbelief. I was past that, but in quiet fury. The kind that doesn't burn hot, but cold. Precise. Focused. That was when I decided it was time to stop being passive. I contacted a lawyer, the same one who'd called me about the house a year before. I gave him every document, every message, every bank record I'd saved. He went through them silently, then looked up at me. You know, he said slowly, if what you're saying is true, this isn't just fraud. It's a pattern. We might be looking at something criminal here. Good, I said. Then let's start digging. From that point on, everything became a quiet, methodical process. I didn't lash out, didn't confront them, not yet. I learned patience from years of being ignored, and now I was going to use it. While my lawyer gathered evidence, I focused on my business, expanding it further. Within months, I was earning more than both of them had ever seen combined. I didn't flaunt it, not publicly, anyway, but I took satisfaction in knowing I had built everything they said I couldn't. The irony was that Chloe eventually reached out again, this time through email. Her tone was different, polite, almost desperate. Hey, Evan. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Things have gotten really bad here. Mom's losing the house. I'm trying to fix it, but I don't know what to do. Pleased if you can help, just this once. I stared at the message for a long time before closing my laptop. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because I had a plan forming, one that would take time, precision, and the same quiet patience they'd once mistaken for weakness. I wasn't the same person who walked out of that house a year ago, bags in hand and heart in pieces. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, stronger, sharper, and far more dangerous than they realized. They had taken everything from me once. Now, it was my turn to take everything back. By the time the second email from Chloe landed in my inbox, I'd already started preparing. I didn't know exactly what shape my revenge would take yet. I just knew it had to be slow, deliberate, and final. Not some loud outburst that ended in another screaming match. No, this needed to hurt in the one way they'd never expect. Through silence, through exposure, through truth. The email was short. Evan, please. Mom's losing her mind. She's talking to lawyers, saying she'll fight for the house even though the bank already took it. I can't keep doing this. I know you hate us, but you're the only one who can fix it. Please call me. It would have been easy to ignore her again, but ignoring meant letting her set the pace. And this time, I wanted control. So I replied with 5 words, I'll see what I can do. And that was the moment everything shifted. The next morning, I met with my lawyer again. He'd been working quietly in the background for months, piecing together the threads of deceit that Mom and Chloe had left behind. When I walked into his office, he already had a folder waiting on his desk. You're going to want to sit down for this, he said. Inside the folder were copies of multiple forged documents, loan applications, credit cards, and even medical bills opened under my name. Some dated back to before Dad passed away. My mother's handwriting was on almost every one. She used your social security number and signature more times than I can count, he explained. Your sister may have signed a few of these too, probably thinking it was harmless. It was worse than I imagined, but in a strange way, it clarified everything. This wasn't just about greed, it was about ownership. My mom had always believed everything in that family, including me, belonged to her. How do we proceed? I asked. He leaned forward. If you want to go legal, we can build a case strong enough to crush them. But I get the feeling you want something more personal. He wasn't wrong. I want them to lose everything the way they made me lose everything, I said quietly. But I wanted to look like they did it to themselves. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then we start by making them comfortable. Make them think they still have power. That line stuck with me. Make them comfortable. Over the next few weeks, I reached out to Chloe again, playing the part of the reluctant older brother. I asked questions, pretended I cared, offered small pieces of advice that made it look like I was on their side. She was hesitant at first, but desperation has a way of erasing skepticism. Within a month, she was confiding in me again. According to her, Mom had fallen into deeper debt. She'd been borrowing from friends, using fake promises of repayment and fabricated stories about me, apparently telling people I'd cut her off financially after stealing from Dad's savings. Classic projection. I listened, nodded, and never corrected her. Instead, I asked Chloe to send me whatever paperwork she had so I could help. She did, bank statements, emails, and old tax forms. She even forwarded me messages between her and a local lender Mom had been harassing. It was like she didn't realize she was handing me every piece of ammunition I needed. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. Mom wasn't just drowning in debt, she was dragging Chloe down with her. Several accounts were joint under both their names, meaning Chloe was legally responsible too. My first instinct was pity. But pity doesn't fix scars, it just delays the healing. So I kept going. I contacted one of my corporate clients, a real estate investment group I'd helped during my firm's early growth. I asked for a favor. I need you to buy something for me, I said during a meeting over coffee. They laughed. Depends what it is. The house I grew up in. Their expressions changed when I explained the situation. I didn't give all the details, just enough for them to understand that it was personal. Within 2 weeks, the paperwork went through. The foreclosure had already processed, and through a series of transactions and shell LLCs, I became the silent owner of the property my mother once screamed at me to leave. I didn't tell her. Not yet. Instead, I let her believe she still had time to fix things. Meanwhile, I made quiet renovations to the house. New locks, new utilities, and a team cleaning out what was left. I told the workers not to throw anything away. I wanted every paper, every photo, every trace of what she'd left behind. During that time, Chloe started calling more often. She wanted updates, reassurance, anything that sounded like hope. I gave her just enough to keep her talking. Through those calls, I learned Mom had started drinking heavily and accusing Chloe of betraying her. The same cycle she'd put me through years ago. She says I'm working with you against her. Chloe confessed one night over the phone. She's losing it, Evan. I don't even know what's real anymore. That's when I realized something. Chloe wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the mastermind either. She'd been molded, trained to obey, to believe that manipulation was love. Part of me hated her for it, but another part pitied her. Still, pity wouldn't stop what was coming. I started reaching out to some of Mom's friends, the people she'd borrowed from, the ones she owed. I introduced myself politely, told them I was her son, and wanted to help straighten things out. They were eager to talk. Turns out, she'd burned nearly every bridge she had, lying about money and making promises she couldn't keep. I took careful notes during each conversation, documenting every debt, every false claim, every piece of gossip. It wasn't about the money, it was about the story. Because once a story starts falling apart, so does the person holding it together. Meanwhile, I instructed my lawyer to file a quiet fraud investigation with the state. It wouldn't go public right away, not until the evidence was airtight. But it would start the process, the slow tightening of the net. Then came the opportunity one hadn't expected. One evening, Chloe called and asked if I could meet them both for dinner. "Mom's ready to apologize," she said hesitantly. "She wants to make things right. I think she finally realizes she went too far." For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. I agreed to meet, but I didn't go alone. My lawyer came with me, posing as a business associate. We met at a quiet restaurant on the edge of town. Mom looked different, thinner, weaker, but her eyes still held that same spark of superiority. "Evan," she said softly, "I was wrong." It was the first time I'd ever heard those words from her. But what followed wasn't an apology. It was another manipulation, dressed up as humility. She talked about how families make mistakes, how we should forgive and move forward, and how the past doesn't matter when blood is involved. I listened carefully, waiting for the catch. It came 5 minutes later. "I just need a small loan," she said finally. "Something to help us get back on our feet. I'll pay you back once things settle." Chloe looked down, clearly ashamed. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to think it over. "Sure," I said slowly. "But I'll need you both to sign a few papers first. You know, just to make it official." Mom's eyes lit up. "Of course, whatever you need." When the waiter brought the check, I left my lawyer's folder on the table, a neat stack of documents labeled Restitution Agreement. Inside were forms acknowledging all the debts, the forged signatures, and the loans under my name. They didn't read them closely, they just signed, eager for the money. I walked out of that restaurant feeling nothing but calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Because those signatures weren't just receipts, they were confessions. I didn't call them after that. Didn't respond to Chloe's messages or Mom's voicemails. I focused on finishing the legal groundwork, gathering the last pieces of evidence, and finalizing the property transfer under my firm's name. By the time they realized what was happening, it would already be too late. For years, they made me believe silence was weakness, that walking away was surrender. But now, I understood something they never would. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. And mine was almost complete. 2 months after that dinner, the first domino fell. It started quietly, an envelope in my mother's mailbox stamped with the seal of the State Financial Crimes Unit. She must have thought it was another debt notice because she didn't open it right away. But when she finally did, I imagine her face drained of color. Inside was a formal notice of investigation for fraudulent credit activity, identity theft, and falsified signatures tied to multiple accounts under my name. I didn't need to be there to know how she reacted. I could picture it perfectly. The sound of her pacing the kitchen, muttering to herself, calling Chloe in a panic. Chloe would try to calm her down, but she'd get dragged into it anyway, because her name was on half of those documents too. My lawyer kept me updated on everything as the investigation moved forward. He was almost amused by how textbook their downfall was. "You gave them every opportunity to hang themselves," he said. "They just kept tightening the rope." He wasn't wrong. See, those restitution agreements they signed at dinner weren't just symbolic. They were legal admissions of guilt, signed, dated, and notarized by the restaurant's notary service, which I discreetly arranged beforehand. They listed every loan, every forged document, every false claim. My lawyer submitted those forms to the state as corroborating evidence, effectively closing the case before it even began. The best part? They still thought I'd given them money. I'd written a check that night. Yes, but it was from an account created solely for tracking purposes, flagged for fraud the moment they tried to cash it. That check became Exhibit A. Within weeks, the investigation escalated. Subpoenas went out to banks, credit companies, and lenders. My mother's name appeared in half a dozen reports. Chloe's appeared in 3. And me? I was officially listed as the primary victim. When the call started coming, I didn't answer. But I saved the voicemails. Evan, you can't do this to your family. Mom's voice cracked between anger and fear. You think they'll believe you over me? You're nothing without us. Then Chloe's, quieter, trembling. I didn't know, Evan. I swear I didn't know. Please, I'm scared. The truth was, I believed her. But belief didn't erase the damage. It didn't undo years of cruelty, manipulation, and betrayal. I couldn't protect her anymore. She had chosen her side long before this started. When the official charges came down, I was sitting in my office, reviewing a new client contract. My lawyer called and said simply, "It's done." Mom was charged with multiple counts of financial fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Chloe got lesser charges, accessory and negligence, but she was still dragged through the public process. Their names appeared in local news articles, small-town gossip forums, and public records. The same woman who used to boast about our perfect family was now a headline. Within weeks, her social circle vanished. The friends she'd borrowed from turned on her, demanding repayment. Creditors froze her accounts. Her car was repossessed. She couldn't pay her lawyer, so she ended up with a public defender. Chloe lost her job soon after. No company wanted the PR mess. The house, of course, was already gone. I waited until the investigation hit its peak before making my final move. Through my real estate firm, I arranged a visit as the new owner. I didn't announce who I was. I just showed up in a crisp suit, clipboard in hand, while a team inspected the property. Mom was there when I arrived, standing on the front lawn, yelling at one of the workers about her rights. She turned as I walked up the driveway. "Who are you?" she snapped. I smiled calmly. "The owner." Her eyes widened. "That's impossible. This is my house." I handed her the paperwork, official, notarized, and signed under the LLC I'd created. She scanned it, her face twisting with disbelief. "No," she whispered. "You can't." "Oh, but I can," I said quietly. "You sold it the moment you stopped paying the mortgage. I just happened to buy it back." Chloe came running out from inside, tears in her eyes. "Evan, please don't do this. She has nowhere to go." I looked at her, and for a moment, the old brother in me wanted to comfort her. But then I remembered every night I stayed awake wondering why I wasn't enough for this family. Every word that broke me while they called it love. "I already did," I said simply. The workers continued clearing the property. I turned to leave, but Mom's voice stopped me. "You think this makes you better than us?" she spat. "You'll end up alone, just like your father." I paused, then looked back over my shoulder. "No," I said softly. "I'll end up free." I didn't wait for her response. By the end of that month, the house was stripped, sold, and renovated into a rental. I never moved into it. I didn't need to. Owning it was enough. Symbolically, it was closure. Practically, it was profit. As for Mom, she pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, but was hit with restitution orders she could never possibly repay. She moved into a small apartment funded by charity, a far cry from the suburban life she used to flaunt. Chloe disappeared for a while after that. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to another state, trying to start over. I didn't chase her. I figured she deserved a chance to find her own redemption, even if it didn't include me. I thought I'd feel guilt. I thought revenge would taste bitter. But it didn't. It felt clean, quiet, like exhaling after holding my breath for years. One night, a few months later, I found the old letter Dad wrote me, the one I'd carried out of the house on the night I left. The paper was still creased from how tightly I'd folded it. I read it again, slower this time. "Don't let them take everything from you, Evan. Not the things that matter." For the first time, I understood what he meant. It was never about the money, the house, or even the justice. It was about reclaiming myself, my peace, my dignity, my sense of worth. They took my family. I built my own life. And as I sat there, staring at that letter, I realized something. Revenge hadn't destroyed me. It had rebuilt me, piece by piece, in silence, with patience. That was the real victory. The next morning, I went for a walk past the park where I'd sat in my lowest moment 2 years earlier. The same rusted swings, the same cracked benches. But now, the air felt different, lighter somehow. A family walked by, a father pushing his son on the swing, laughing. For a moment, I watched them, remembering what I used to wish for. Then I smiled and kept walking. Because I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love. I had something far more powerful: peace. And as far as revenge goes, that's the only kind that lasts.